This is a Candy Factory Mini. So you want to write a book? With Suzette Mullen.
Hello, I'm Suzette Mullen, book coach, nonfiction writer, and your host. Welcome to So You Want to Write a Book. My goal is to break down the challenging process of finding and getting clear on your story or your big idea so you can finally take action on the book that's been rattling around your head or tugging at your heart. Now, even if you never plan to write a book, I'll share tips that will help you become a more informed reader and a more effective writer in your work life. If you have questions, email them to me at hello@yourstoryfinder.com or feel free to comment in the post and I'll get back to you. So go ahead and grab a pen, paper, your phone, or laptop to jot down some notes. And let's get started. If you are a writer or you're someone who's dreamed of becoming one, today's topic will speak to you. Practically every writer has experienced this problem. I'm going to go out on a limb and say every writer has experienced this problem. You want to write, but you're not writing. You say tomorrow will be different, but it's the same story, different day. There's a battle going on inside you, and the wrong side is winning. There's a crucial mindset shift that every writer needs to make to end up on the right side of this battle. That's why I wore my army green today. Are you ready to stop talking about writing and actually write? Let's go ahead and dig in. As a book coach, I see this struggle every day. And as a writer, this was my struggle for more years than I want to admit. It started in my mid to late 30s, after I emerged from the fog of early motherhood. You know, when I wasn't getting up every few hours to nurse a baby. I'd left the practice of law and I yearned for a professional purpose, a creative outlet, something that was my own besides my identity and role as a mother and wife. Now, I wasn't one of those kids who had written her first novel when she was in second grade. I've actually never been drawn to write fiction, but I have always loved to write. And I thought I was a pretty good writer, too. People told me that all the time. I was in love with the idea of writing a book, of becoming an author with a capital A. I dreamed of book signings, appearances on daytime TV, Oprah when she still had her show. I was going to write a book someday and become an author. I'd start and stop and start again. I'd take continuing education classes at a nearby college. I'd attend a workshop. I'd gather a few friends and start a small writing group. But I never could seem to gain traction. I never could actually finish a project. I never actually could get the book written. Now, maybe it was simply a matter of timing, that the timing wasn't right for me then. But maybe it was something else. Maybe it was that I wasn't aware of the number one enemy to creativity, what Stephen Pressfield calls resistance. That and that there's a single mindset shift that a writer can make to combat resistance. So this little book, The War of Art, someone recommended this slim volume to me a few years ago when I was feeling unfocused and frustrated that I wasn't making progress on my book. And suddenly I understood that what I had experienced and was experiencing all those years of starting and stopping, it had a name: resistance. So part one of The War of Art defines and describes what resistance is. Part two describes how to combat resistance. And part three describes how to keep going in the long term. Now, parenthetically, for any self-help writers out there, I want you to note the structure of this book. Part one, problem. Part two, solution. Part three, what's next. It's a very simple, clear structure, one that can work for many self-help books. So I want to give you a quick overview of what resistance looks like and how it shows up. And then I want to talk to you about Pressfield's solution to the problem. He writes, "There's a secret that real writers know that wannabe writers don't. And the secret is this: it's not the writing part that's hard. What's hard is sitting down to write. What keeps us from sitting down is resistance." So I'm willing to state that there isn't a writer in the world who hasn't struggled with putting their butt in the chair. Anne Lamott, one of my favorite authors, she's a best-selling author of more than 30 books, including the marvelous Bird by Bird, tweeted, "How to write. Stop not writing. Get and keep your butt in chair." Stephen King says, "Writing equals ass in chair." So let's all agree that the secret to writing is putting your butt in the chair and writing. Simple, right? And resistance is what keeps us from doing this. So here are some of the characteristics of resistance. Resistance is invisible. It's internal, it's insidious, and it's universal. And it presents itself in many different forms: fear, distraction, self-doubt, and procrastination. Pressfield writes that procrastination is the most common manifestation of resistance because it's the easiest to rationalize. We don't tell ourselves, "I'm never going to write my symphony," he says. Instead, we say, "I'm going to write my symphony. I'm just going to start tomorrow." Well, we all know what this looks like, right? We do it with big things and we do it with small things. I'll start exercising tomorrow. Tomorrow, I will open the distraction blocker on my laptop and I won't check email or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram when I'm supposed to be writing. Tomorrow, I'll stick to the block scheduling that I've meticulously color-coded on my calendar. Tomorrow, I'll start tomorrow. Pressfield goes on to say the most pernicious aspect of procrastination is that it becomes a habit. We don't just put off our lives today, we put them off till our deathbed. Never forget, he writes, this very moment we can change our lives. There never was a moment and there never will be when we are without the power to alter our destiny. This second, we can turn the tables on resistance. This second, we can sit down and do our work. Okay, that pretty much says it all, doesn't it? So how do we put ourselves in the position to make that decision to sit down and do our work? There's a simple secret. Pressfield says, a mindset shift that empowers you to combat resistance and get your work done. He calls it turning pro. He says amateurs play for fun and pros play for keeps. So I remember early on in my book coaching practice that I sat down with a business mentor who asked me if my work was a hobby or a business. So what she was asking me was I taking this work seriously? Was I playing for keeps if I was a pro or an amateur? She could have asked me the same question about my writing. Is it a hobby or is it a business? To be clear, there is nothing wrong with your writing being a hobby. It just means that you probably won't get that book written. Being a pro isn't about whether you earn money as a writer. Most writers have day jobs. It's about your mindset. It's about being prepared to meet resistance every single day and sitting down and doing the work anyway. So I love this passage on page 80 in this book. Pressfield writes, the professional respects resistance. He knows if he caves in today, no matter how plausible the pretext, he'll be twice as likely to cave in tomorrow. The professional knows that resistance is like a telemarketer. If you so much as say hello, you're finished. The pro doesn't even pick up the phone. He stays at work. The more I work with, am in community with other writers, the easier it is for me to distinguish the pros from the amateurs. Amateurs write when they're inspired. Pros put their butts in the chair, inspiration or not. Amateurs have fuzzy goals with no accountability. Pros have specific goals and build in accountability to ensure they meet those goals. Amateurs think they can go it alone. Pros know it takes a village to take a book from idea to completion. Now, the writers I work with, I'm privileged to work with, are pros. They've made a commitment to their project, time, energy, and money. They get their work done. I'm in awe of what they produce, and they show me what's possible. One of the writers I'm working with right now is a single mom of 2, and one of her children is severely disabled. She also has a full-time job working with special needs families. Since we started working together in August, she's consistently shown up at the page to share her message of hope to parents of children with special needs. She's going to get her book done, and her message is going to get out into the world. Christine is a pro. So as a writer, believe me, I've been on both sides of the fence, amateur and pro. For years, I did the amateur thing. I went to workshops. I went to conferences. I took classes. I spent lots of time and lots of money, and all of these were good things, don't get me wrong. But they tended to be one-off events. I'd leave them without a concrete plan for my next steps. And when I finally decided to turn pro, I started getting results. This fall, I set a specific goal that I would be pitching my memoir before I turned 60, and I am going to meet that goal. I have a complete polished memoir manuscript and book proposal to pitch that manuscript, and next week, I'm going to be sending out my first query letters. This is what turning pro looks like. And this is how I've made it work for me. I do block scheduling. I set time aside every week to write. I time that I won't schedule meetings, check email or Facebook, or do client work. Time when I write, period. The writing's important, so I do it first before the rest of the day gets away from me. 2, I make specific attainable goals. Not I'm going to work on my memoir, but I'm going to revise chapter 7, or I'm going to write this particular scene. And 3rd, and this is the most important part for me, I have built in accountability and ongoing support. If someone is not expecting my pages or draft of my manuscript at a certain time, it's way too easy for resistance to win the battle. Maybe some writers can get their work done without the accountability, but it doesn't work for me. Now, accountability can be hiring someone like a book coach who provides support and feedback as well, which is the work that I do. Or it can be finding a critique partner or a writer's group or class where you need to turn in work. But without accountability and deadlines, I start looking like an amateur again. So I practice what I preach. If I want to get a book written, I hire a book coach. That's how I've achieved my writing goals. So what works for you? I'd love to know. So to wrap up, I want you to think about where you are in your book writing journey. Now, have you started? If no, why not? Are you starting and stopping, not gaining traction, or are you frozen with fear near the finish line? Resistance is likely the culprit. And remember, you're not powerless. Show up regularly, prepared to meet resistance. Learn to recognize its face. Get real with yourself. Do you really want to get that book written? Decide whether you want to remain an amateur or turn pro. It's really that simple. It's tough love with yourself. As Anne Lamott says, how to write. Stop not writing. Get and keep your butt in the chair. So if this message resonates with you, here are some action steps you can take. First, I want you to consider buying The War of Art. It's a book I've come back to time and time again. Not only buy it, but read it. The author's even offering a free mini course on the book. You can go to his website, stephenpressfield.com, and check it out. And I don't get any money for this. I just think it's a great opportunity. I want you to also start cluing into the particular ways that resistance shows up for you. If you really want to write that book, say yes to turning pro. And if you're ready to get some professional accountability and support, I invite you to check out my book coaching offerings at yourstoryfinder.com. If you've enjoyed these Get Real tips and would like more, also go to my website, yourstoryfinder.com, and sign up for my newsletter. It's chock full of tips to help writers get started, get unstuck, and get their stories out into the world. So next time, we're going to be reframing the conversation around imposter syndrome. Is it an individual failing or a systemic problem? I look forward to seeing you then. And in the meantime, happy reading and writing. So You Want to Write a Book is part of the Candy Factory mini-series and is a proud member of the Candy Factory Collective.
Over the past 8 years, Suzette has been on a mission to help writers clear the fog and cut through the overwhelm so they can move their ideas out of their head and onto the page.
Visit yourstoryfinder.com to learn more about Suzette as well as her writing coach offerings.
So You Want to Write a Book is produced by the Candy Factory Collective for So Good Lancaster, another great project of the Candy Factory Co-working in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The show is produced by Ann Kirby with production support by Anna Tran and Jason Mundock. Administrative support by Ariana Henderson. Find out what makes Lancaster so good at SoGoodLancaster.com. Candy Factory.
Collective.